Next week, we'll hear from a professor at Humboldt State. That's the guest speaker next week. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Professor Pourhomayoun, who is from Cal State, LA, and he's going to tell us about data analytics and data science and all these new cool things. So let's welcome our speaker.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk. Today, I'm going to talk about data analytics, and I will focus on some of the applications in healthcare. So, as you may know, data analytics and predictive analytics and, well, generally data science are very popular field of research and study these days in computer science. There are many applications for that. Everybody is looking for data scientists, data analytics these days. It's very high demanded in industry. And these are just some of the applications, Well, a stock market prediction, very popular field. There are many companies in New York City, in Wall Street. There are many of them in San Francisco, in Los Angeles that try to predict a stock market. Real estate prediction companies like Zillow and Redfin, as you know, they are trying to predict real estate value. Online shopping and advertisements, websites like Amazon, they can predict what you need, what you want based on your behavior and other customers, based on your action and other customers' action on the website. And I put Facebook here. Of course, Facebook is a social media network, but it's also a great platform. It's a great platform for advertisement. So based on your actions and reactions on Facebook, based on what you like, what your comments are, your clicks, Facebook can recognize what you are looking for, what you want, and they will introduce that to you in the form of advertisement. Recommender systems is another application. Netflix is one example. Based on what you have watched in the past and based on your past rating, it can recommend what to watch later. Self-driving cars, very popular and hot topic these days. All of them are based on artificial intelligence. Many companies are competing with each other. As you know, Tesla, Apple, Google, Ford, all of them are looking for self-driving cars these days. And one of the very interesting fields, one of the very interesting applications in healthcare, which is also my favorite field of research. So I will focus on this field for today. But if you're interested, of course, you can find many resources for other applications. Let me start with a quick question for you. So we know that healthcare is expensive. Do you have any idea how much do we spend on healthcare nationally, annually? Any idea? Just guess something. Yes.
100 million?
100 million?
Or billion, I should say.
Okay, it's more than $3 trillion. I mean, 3,000 billion, more than 3,000 billion. So healthcare cost has increased by 10 times over the past 30 years, from 256 billion in 1980 to more than $3 trillion in 2017. And it's still predicted to grow with faster rate. 80% of healthcare costs is due to chronic disease management. Chronic conditions affect more than 30% of people in the United States. So let's take a look at an example. Heart failure. Heart failure, as you know, is one of the leading causes of death in the United States and all around the world. Every year, we spend $450 billion only on heart failure. 4 million patients admitted to the hospitals because of heart failure. And the worst thing is that out of these patients, almost 25% of them return back to hospitals, readmitted to the hospitals because of same issue, only within 30 days. And you know hospitalization is very expensive. Well, the good news is that technology can help. So for example, when I was back at UCLA, we developed a system to predict hospital readmission. And according to our analysis, we could save up to 71% of the readmission cost. So this is what this is one of the topics that I'm gonna talk about this today. So this is the main idea. We want to provide patients with some devices, with some medical devices, including wearables, body sensors, for example, or other type of devices, to collect biological data from them. The data will be transmitted to the back end here to our server, where we have our predictive and analytics model based on machine learning algorithm, and this system can predict medical conditions before happening. So when we do that, we can provide this information to caregivers like doctors and nurses, and they can do intervention, they can do assistance or treatment to prevent that medically adverse event from happening. By medically adverse event for heart failure patients, for example, I mean, well, it can be heart attack or a stroke or emergency visit to the hospitals or even death. So based on this very brief introduction, let me summarize my research. So this research has 3 main components: remote health monitoring parts, which is the collection of sensors and devices to collect data from patients, biological information, including vital signs, for example. It can be on timely basis, it can be continuously, and then transmit this data to the back end where we have our big data analytics engine to make prediction, and then we can use it for different application and clinical trials. Of course, I'm not able to talk about everything, but I selected some of the topics to talk about today. So I start with multiple modeling and parallel computing for predictive analytics in healthcare. So remote health monitoring systems is not, it is a long-standing problem. So we had remote health monitoring system from maybe 10, 15 years ago. The idea is that doctors provide the patients with some devices, for example, blood pressure, cough. This device measures patients' blood pressure on timely basis and transmit this data to the caregivers to check if blood pressure is higher than a rate, higher than a threshold, then they do action, they take action. A more smarter way is to, rather than manually checking this data, because the data is huge, just think about that. Millions of patients can use the system and we monitor them 24/7. So we need a predictive analytics engine, which is an artificial intelligence system based on machine learning algorithm that automatically receive this data and make predictions. So this is what we are looking for. So this is an example, the structure that we implemented. We have different medical devices. Depending on the type of disease, we can provide different devices. For example, blood pressure monitor, blood glucose monitor to measure blood sugar. We call it glucometer, weight scale, heart rate monitor, many other devices. It can be even in a smartwatch to monitor physical activity, right? So these data collected from patients, these devices are usually wireless devices. So for example, a blood pressure cuff measure blood pressure, systolic blood pressure and diastolic blood pressure, transmit it wirelessly to the patient's smartphone, and the smartphone send it to us by internet. We have the data in our database, so it happens on daily basis, for example, or I don't know, twice, several times a day. Or some of them can be continuously. For example, a smartwatch monitor the physical activity continuously. So we receive that data, we do data pre-processing to clean the data, get rid of outliers or bad part of the data. Knowledge or feature extraction is the next step, dimensional reduction or feature selection. So of course I'm not able to talk about every details, but this is the main architecture. And after extracting some useful knowledge from this raw data, we will have our machine learning algorithms that will learn from past data, from what happened in the past for other patients, build a predictive model, and using this predictive model can make prediction on this new patient, predict medical conditions, for example, predicting heart attack. There are several sources of raw data, as I mentioned. Sensor measurement, like it can collect biological data like vital signs, blood pressure, heart rate, and on and on. And demographics information can be very helpful sometimes. So the more data, the better, to be honest. Contextual information like patient's salary, job, insurance, these are the information that can help us to make better prediction. Some kind of data can be collected through questionnaires. For example, self-responses to the question that we sent to the patient based on what happened, based on the other information. For example, we can send some question to patient's smartphone, ask him, do you feel dizziness today? Or do you have pain in your chest today? And these are the data that can be collected through questionnaire. Activity on social networks can give us some information about patient's health condition, and also data collected from a smartphone, a smartwatch, like physical activity, and electrical health records that we have from each patient in the hospital. So these are different sources of data that we can use in our artificial intelligence method, in our machine learning algorithms to do prediction, to perform prediction. Of course, data can be in the form of numerical or categorical. Again, we don't have to talk about all of this. We don't have time to talk about all of these details. But we developed this system a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago. And we applied that on a good number of patients, 1,500 patients with heart failure in California. And the goal was to, based on the data collected in the past 7 days, we wanted to make predicting medically adverse event in next 5 days. Okay. And we could that with accuracy of about more than 70%. So 70% accuracy in predicting, for example, heart attack 5 days before happening. So this was the idea. So this is a more detailed architecture for the same system. We have data here. As you see here, of course, a machine learning algorithm includes 2 stages, the training and testing. So in training stage, based on past data, based on what happened, based on historical data, what happened for these patients before, or based on what happened with similar patients in the past, we can train our model and build a predictive model, and then use this to make prediction on future data. So this is the main idea so far. And any questions? If you have any questions or you want me to describe something, just let me know. Okay, so this system works well. as I mentioned, accuracy, pretty good results. We still want to improve the accuracy of that. So one idea was to multiple prediction modeling. So the idea is that each patient has a unique physiological reaction. So in similar health condition, in similar health risk condition, the symptoms and consequently the physiological data, vital signs that we collect may differ from patient to patient. So our results show that rather than using a single universal predictive model to be used for every patient, it's better to cluster patients into several groups, put similar patients in a group, and then design a predictive model for each single group. So this is a new architecture that we applied. So we have raw data. Raw data, I mean, by raw data, I mean, for example, blood pressure that is measured for today. We extract some statistical features out of that. For example, maximum of blood pressure in the past 7 days, minimum of blood pressure in the past 7 days, average of blood pressure in the past 7 days, a standard deviation of that. Many statistical features that we can extract from raw data. And then in this stage, based on some of those features, we can cluster using an unsupervised machine learning algorithm like clustering technique. We group them automatically into like n groups, for example, 8 groups. So when we do that, similar patients are here. And the patients in group 1 are different from patients group 2, but people here in group 1 are similar. For each one, we extract, we select the best set of features and then design a predictive model specifically for this group, for each one of them. So this is an example when we cluster patients into different groups. In this one, I used 2 features, blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, and weight to group the patient. So of course we cannot, for example, some patients are obese, some patients are, well, really thin, so we cannot use a single predictive model to make prediction for all of them. That is why we cluster them, in this case based on weight and blood pressure, into 8 different groups. In the other one, we used a third feature, age, here, to cluster them based on 3 features. Well, so this is for sake of visualization. In practice, I used like 10 features for clustering patients. But of course, we cannot show more than 3D on paper. So this is just an example. And then for each one of them, we build a predictive model to make prediction, to predict heart attack. So before I continue, well, I don't know how much are you familiar with machine learning? Have you had any courses on machine learning? So when we do machine learning, when we predict something, we have 2 types of error usually. So this is a very simple example, very simple example. Suppose that this line is our predictive model. We have 2 types of samples, positive and negative. This line is our classifier. It distinguishes between positive samples and negative samples. So anything on the left-hand side of the right will be predicted as positive. Anything on the right-hand side of the line will be predicted as negative. So as you see here, for example, this one is a negative sample. Actually, it's a negative. But because it's on the left-hand side of the line, we by mistake predicted it as a positive, right? So this is an error. So we call this false positive error because we predicted that as positive by mistake. And the red ones, similarly, we call them false negative because they are positive, but by mistake, your machine learning algorithm predicted them as negative. So every machine learning algorithm, every prediction has these two types of errors. So there is no machine learning with perfect result. There is no predictive model with 100% accuracy. We always have these two types of error, and always there is a trade-off between these two types of error. And they are both costly. So in case of healthcare, what do you think? If positive means heart attack and negative means nothing, so which one is more costly?
False negative.
False negative, exactly. Because false positive is a false alarm, right? So in the worst case, what is the cost of false alarm? A wrong call to the doctor, or in the worst case, a visit, a non-necessary visit in the hospital. But in false negative cases, there was a heart attack, but we didn't predict that. So the cost can be death. Okay? That is why, in these cases, suppose that if our classifier is just a single line, it is not a single line. When we use 100 features for prediction, then our feature domain is not 2D anymore. It's 100D. Okay, so in a space with 100 dimensions, we want to design a classifier that distinguishes these two samples. But in this very simple case, we prefer to, in this example, to reduce false negative. So maybe we would like to shift this line a little to the right. But anyway, by shifting the line to the left and right, we are generating a curve called ROC curve. True positive error versus true positive rate versus false positive rate. So the closer to that top corner, the better. The closer to that top corner means that false positive rate is smaller and true positive rate is higher. So that point right here is the ideal point. So in this example, as you see, the red curve is when we use a single model. The error when we use the single model, the accuracy. And the other 8 curves, which are all better than the red one, are different, are 8 different groups that we do prediction for each one of them individually. So as you see, when we do this application, when we smartly, in a smart way, cluster patients into different groups, then our prediction, our predictive analytics works better. And of course, as I mentioned, big data, this is big data. We want to monitor maybe millions of patients 24/7. So it's a huge amount of data. And we may need to apply big data techniques like, for example, MapReduce. And of course, clustering will help us to do MapReduce better. Any questions about this topic? So it was just a very, very short, brief review of the predicting medical adverse event, especially for heart attack, for heart failure patients. We have published a good number of papers on that. So if you're interested, I would encourage you to take a look at those papers. The next topic I'm going to talk about is context-aware analytics for activity recognition. So again, this is another application of predictive analytics for healthcare. This is a very popular field these days. So as we know, activity monitoring and indoor localization, these two are two important concepts in remote health monitoring systems in tracking the position, motions, and reactions of patients, the elderly, or any person with special needs, or well, generally any person, any individual. can use this system. And these days we have a lot of devices to do that. Your smartphone has already had some tools for activity recognition. A smartwatch, we have many of them, iWatch or other devices, or Fitbit, or many other smartwatch that are being used for activity recognition or activity monitoring. So for activity recognition, we want your smartwatch to detect if you are walking or sitting or running or what type of activity. So it's a classification problem. We want to classify your type of activity. So again, it's based on machine learning algorithm. There are two main stages: a training stage that we learn from past data, and then testing a stage which we make prediction on future data. So, your cell phone or a smartwatch, they have some sensors. They have accelerometer and they have gyroscope. So it returns some, it gives you some signals in X, Y, Z directions for acceleration and orientation, the accelerometer and gyroscope signals. So we have 6 signals at least. These are continuous signals. We need to do signal pre-processing to clean that, denoise that, remove the noise, extract some statistical features from that. Again, like different statistical features, mean, standard deviation, the type of fluctuation, and so on. We may need to turn the signal, move it to another domain, for example, to frequency domain, and then measure some kind of frequency-based features, like wavelet-based features, and so on. And select the best features, and then training a stage means the data that we have these features, and also we know the label. We know if the if the individual was running or sitting or lying or walking, whatever. So we train your machine learning algorithm based on this training data. We build a predictive model here in training stage, and now we want to use it in future to make prediction in future. So for now, your smartwatch or a smartphone already have this model. So this training happened in Apple company. They put a trained model in your smartwatch. It can update its model by time, but it is accurate enough when you purchase your smartwatch. So from now on, when you get new signal, your predictive model can predict if it is sitting or standing or walking or running or lying or whatever activity you do. So this is a standard activity recognition method based on machine learning, data analytics. We try to improve the accuracy of this model by using some contextual information. So the idea was simple, but the result was really good. Let me give you an example. Of course, the probability of lying in kitchen is much less than probability of lying in bedroom, right? So if we know the location, we can take advantage of that to improve the accuracy of your activity recognition. Or if we know the time, if it is like 2 in the midnight or 2 a.m., the probability of running, of course, it is not impossible, but the probability of running is much less than probability of lying. Okay? That is why, based on time, based on location, or other contextual, we call all of this information contextual features. Based on these contextual features, we want to take advantage of them to improve the accuracy of our model. So we added a patient or individual tracking module to the system. Tracking module is responsible for detecting the location of an individual or patient in his house. So there are some algorithm that we developed to do that. Again, we don't have time to talk about all details, but assume that we are able to find the location of patient at his home when he's home. So, for example, in this example, a patient moving around his house. So the blue line is the actual patient's path, and the red one is our detection for its location. So we are pretty close. Now, we modify the architecture of this prediction into this one. Here, based on some training data, in training stage, we determine the probability distribution of labels for each location. So we find the probability of, for example, walking in the kitchen, the probability of running in the kitchen, the probability of sitting in the kitchen, probability of lying in the kitchen, and so on, in every location. And then we have probability distribution that tells us the probability of each label based on the location. And we did the same thing for time of the day. And then take those information into consideration when we want to make prediction. And it significantly improved the accuracy of activity recognition for us. So this is an example. So this is the accuracy of the model when we do context aware, when we take into account location and time. The blue one is just conventional technique. So as you see, the accuracy is higher. These are the best type of features that we used in this case. For example, the first one, average difference. AX means accelerometer. So accelerometer gives us 3 signals in X direction, Y direction, and Z direction. So for example, mean means mean of gyroscope signal in Z direction. So there are some algorithm, we call them feature selection or dimensional reduction, that gives us the best statistical features that we can extract from a raw signal. And for this work, we won the best paper award in data analytics conference. So let me talk. How much time do we have? Okay. This is another topic that I want to talk about. This is a very interesting topic, and it's related to activity recognition again. Data uncertainty management and authenticity verification. So why uncertainty management is important, or authentication is important for activity recognition? So let me give you an example. So the first time we thought about this problem was when some insurance company, health insurance company, they provide patients with some wearable device, for example, a smart watch, and they monitor their physical activity. Well, there are some rewards or discount for their, healthcare premium, or there are some rewards for patients who are more active. So this is the goal. If the individual is more active, the physical activity level is higher, then and they give some award or rewards or some kind of that to the patient. So what happened was that in some of our studies, we noticed that after this policy, many of the patients, the physical activity, for most of the patients, the physical activity goes up. But for some of them, the physical activity was really high, a big jump in physical activity, but the other biological parameters like blood pressure or weight, they had weight gain, okay? Or blood pressure goes up. So it was very weird case because this patient had a lot of physical activity, but he still had a weight gain. So it turns out that some people cheat by just, well, it's very simple. It's a smart watch. There's an accelerometer in that, and based on the acceleration, it estimates the physical activity. So what if the patients don't walk, but just shake his hand? Okay? Pretend that he is running. We call this self-cheating, when a patient manually shakes the phone or watch to give the impression that they perform intense physical activity. I know a patient that put on his smartwatch on his dog and asked him to run to make fake physical activity for the system. Another type of cheating is impersonation cheating, when subject hand the phone or watch over to a friend or second party to wear and perform physical activity on their behalf. So when you have a friend that wake up at 5 a.m. every morning and go running for 1 hour, you can give your watch to him, and then he generates a lot of fake physical activity. So we decided to design a system that detect these two types of cheating. And we did. First of all, this is based on machine learning, again, data analytics. We are able to detect self-cheating versus just randomly shaking your hand, because running or walking, this type of activity has a pattern. It is not just random. This is different from random. So rather than just measuring the entire physical activity, estimate the entire physical activity level, we try to find a pattern in that. We try to see if we see walking pattern or it's just some random shaking. And we were able to do to detect impersonation cheating, because it's very interesting. Each person, each individual has his or her own unique pattern for walking and running. So it's like a fingerprint. So the way that I walk is different from the way that you walk. Everybody has its own unique pattern for walking. It's exactly like fingerprint. So the system, if you train your system based on the information collected from that individual person, then the system is able to distinguish between his walking and others walking. So this is what we did, and the accurate. So this is exactly this. Again, the same model. We have training a stage to train your model to learn the pattern of your walking, and then we have testing a stage that recognize if the patient or the user is cheating or doing the real physical activity. The accuracy was like 88% in detecting impersonation, detecting your walking versus others walking. Any questions? So these are three, I think time is over. These are three applications that I talked about. There are many, many other applications in healthcare, predicting cancer, predicting different health conditions. So the data analytics, we had a lot of different clinical trials. We have worked with many different patients. We had project for AIDS patient, and 1,200 patients with AIDS. We provided them with the system and predicted their medical condition. We had a project in cancer to monitor patients' physical activity. Patients who were under chemotherapy, we wanted to detect their physical activity, and then the doctors can adjust the chemotherapy doses based on the patient's activity. So these are just some examples, but there are many applications for data analytics in healthcare. And as I mentioned at the beginning, in the first slide, data analytics, predictive analytics, and data science, these are very popular topic these days. You can find application for that in every field. Most of the companies are looking for data scientist position these days. So according to Glassdoor, so as you know, Glassdoor is a website for job search. Data scientist is one of the best jobs in 2017 in the list of, I think it's the first one in the list of best jobs in the United States in 2017. So it's a very popular topic with many applications in all different fields. So I stop here. I encourage you, if you're interested in this field, if you're interested in this research, and if you have time, I encourage you to take a look at my publications, my papers. They're in my website if you are interested. And thank you so much for your time. If you have any question, please feel free to ask.
We have time for a couple of questions.
Yes.
Yeah, when going about the data collection, because it's healthcare related, how do you guys deal with the security side of that?
Yeah, so always in data analytics, one of the challenges is the security and privacy. Usually, we are computer science people. So when we do one of this healthcare related project, we usually collaborate with a team of doctors from medical school. They are responsible for patient recruitment. And I personally always tell them that I don't need names. Don't give me the names. Just give me some numbers and ID numbers and the data. So we are really not interested in this kind of thing. But there's a very complicated procedure. IRB, we need to fill out some IRB applications and IRB approval. We have to make sure that we keep data safe. So there are some rules that we have to follow. So it is usually a complicated process, but for us as data science people and computer science people, we really don't care about the name of the patients, for example. We just care about the data, the features, the biological information part of that. Yes?
How do you differentiate between an outlier and a medical emergency?
Well, this is a very good question. Well, medical emergency has a pattern. Okay, so in any machine learning algorithm, you are able to predict something because it has a pattern. So this is pattern recognition. There are some algorithms, we call them anomaly detection. So in anomaly detection techniques, you detect anything which is not normal, But in for example, supervised machine learning algorithm, you are looking for a pattern in the data. So even medical emergency, heart attack, it has a pattern. It is not just something random out of range. It is not just some outlier. It is a pattern. And machine learning algorithm looks for that pattern, try to extract that pattern in the data. But some of the outliers are easy to find. For example, well, in one of our studies, we monitor patients' weight on daily basis. Okay, so the patient was like 150 pounds, and we received like 150 today, 149, 151, 153. But when you receive like 50 pounds or 250 pounds, you know that this is outlier, and it happens a lot. It's not something. It happens a lot. So for one of our patients, for example, we received like 30 pounds a day, 25 pounds a day, and we called them. He said, "Okay, sorry, my dog jumped on the weight scale," and the weight scale automatically sent us the weight of his dog. So it happens a lot. Or we ask a patient to use this weight scale on daily basis twice a day. So weight scale is important because for heart attack or heart failure, a day before or 2 days before heart failure, the heart doesn't work properly, the blood circulation doesn't work properly, so swelling happen in tissues, swelling in ankle, for example, or other part of body, and patients gain weight, for example, 3 pounds in a day. This is something dangerous. So our machine learning algorithm detects that as a red flag. But we ask our patient to use this weight scale once a day or twice a day. Some of them share this weight scale with all family members. So we have a lot of data like this. It's hard. It's hard, especially for medical data when you collect them from remote health monitoring system. Some of the people are in not good condition. It's hard for them to transmit data. They make mistakes. So bad data, outlier is always a problem. We try to remove them as much as possible, and then for the rest of them, we let machine learning algorithm to take care of it. Yes?
So have you seen patterns of device failure and kind of have to deal with those, or is it not something you've really observed yet?
Pattern of device failure?
Yeah.
What type of failure? You mean we don't receive a signal from a device?
So like if a device, if there's patterns of malfunctioning, like sensors start going bad, do you notice patterns?
Well, you know, for malfunctioning, one thing that is very common and again is very big problem in every machine learning algorithm is missing values. So if you have missing values, if device doesn't work properly, or the patient's adherence is low, we receive a lot of missing value in the system, in your data set. For example, you ask patients to measure his blood pressure every day. He does it 3 times a week. Okay? So we will have a lot of missing values, and we still have to do that. We still have to make prediction based on that data. There are some techniques in machine learning to deal with missing value. Some of them called missing value imputation. It tries to estimate that missing value based on other data samples and other data samples that happened in the past. So there are some algorithms to do that.
Thank you very much.